Hello and welcome to another Maintenance Right on Schedule tutorial. My name is David, and in this video, we'll be covering how to add parts and supplies into your inventory. Now, this video is one of many in our series of tutorials on our inventory feature. I definitely suggest checking out some of the others via our inventory playlist on YouTube or on our tutorials page at MaintenanceROS.com/tutorials. Let's dive on in. We're here on our inventory page, and since this is the second inventory tutorial video that I've filmed, it's still pretty empty. At this point, all I've done is set up the main deck and created some storage locations. Now it's time to add some parts to those locations. I'm going to select over here this Add Inventory button, which brings us to the Update Inventory page. Now right now, I'm only focusing on how to add new items to your inventory. But later on, this essentially the same update inventory flow can be used to adjust your inventory levels as well. There should be another video which focuses on that topic in the pop-up banner above. We're going to start off and give a quick summary of what's happened and why we're updating our inventory using this summary field. Now, for this first time, our default initial inventory setup description, it's pretty appropriate, so I'm going to leave that as is. We can choose to adjust the timeline of when these parts were added to our inventory by hitting this Edit button. We can then manually adjust the date, or we've got a calendar button, which we can use. Now, I'm pretty happy to go ahead and keep things simple, so we'll just keep it as of right now. Now, down in this Inventory Changes section, this is where we can begin adding inventory items. I'm going to start off with an oil filter, and not just any oil filter. One for my Volvo Penta engines. Now, it is worth spending a bit of time thinking about the name. I'm going to designate this as Volvo, just because like when you search for inventory items, this name is the field that's going to be searched. So having oil filter Volvo versus oil filter Onan would be a very helpful distinction. So now I'm going to come over, we'll click Add, and now we can select all the attributes we'd like to track for an oil filter that would be used on the engines. We can adjust the name here. We can designate the type of units. For something like an oil filter, I'm probably just going to stick with the default units. But when we have something like engine oil, which I'll use in my next example, you can change this to liters or gallons or whatever you'd like. Now let's cover what these attributes are and what it means if you choose to track them. Manufacturer and model, that's pretty straightforward. I'd say there are maybe two different reasons to track this. The first being if you want a helpful reminder of exactly the model number for when you have to reorder the items in the future, which that's the case I want for now. So I'm going to go ahead and select the checkbox. And the second is if you have multiple brands or part numbers of an item that can serve the same purpose. This is probably not as common for an oil filter as we say maybe it would be for brands of engine oil, which is why we use that as our next example. Tracking serial numbers, that can be helpful if it's important to know like which specific part of the many you have in inventory were used in a repair. Now, not all items are going to have individual serial numbers, so it's worth checking if one does have this before you choose to track it. Storage location, I'd say that's incredibly important, and I would definitely recommend tracking it for all the inventory items you add to your boat. Now, by tracking this, we'll be able to designate on our map where we've stored it, and also if you have the same item stored in multiple locations, you'll be able to use that as long as you're tracking the storage location. Now for this expiration date attribute, what comes to my mind is all the adhesives and sealants that I kept on my boat. I'd have multiple tubes of 3M4000 or Sikaflex, and I would definitely want to keep track of those different tubes by when they would expire. Not so much of an issue for an oil filter. Now, some inventory items on the boat may not be used in their entirety during a maintenance task, which is why we allow you to designate the item as partially consumable. Using part of a container of oil for an oil change is a perfect example, so we'll do that next. And finally, if you have a minimum quantity of this item that you would like to make sure is always in your inventory, you can set that amount here. Doing this will let the system remind you when your inventory levels are low and you need to restock. So for a catamaran with 2 engines, Let's say I want to keep a minimum of 3 oil filters on the boat. That way, I have at least one spare and can also do a full servicing of both engines. So I think I am happy with all of those attributes. Let's go ahead and hit save and continue. The next thing we need to do is set up a group. For MaintenanceROS inventory purposes, a group is an inventory item with a specific collection of attributes. You'll see what I mean as we go through this. Let's go ahead and hit the pick button. And because this is our first time, we will have to create a group. We can do that here with the plus button. And now we have the 2 attributes we set up for the Volvo Penta oil filter inventory item. The first thing we need to choose is where we're going to store it on the boat. Since this is a Volvo Penta part, I want to store it in my Volvo Penta bin in my midship cabinet. So I'm going to select that. The other attribute we wanted to track was this manufacturer and model. I'm going to type in Volvo Penta, and just to keep things easy, I'm going to say the part number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now this is a group of Volvo Penta oil filters that's made up of all oil filters with a part number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and are stored in this midship cabinet Volvo Penta bin. Let's go ahead and hit create and save that group. Now we need to say how many filters we have in the group. So again, that means for this inventory item, how many oil filters with a part number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are stored in my midship cabinet Volvo Penta bin. And let's say there are 3. Now, I do really want to drive home this concept. So let's say I have 2 additional filters with the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 part number, but they're stored in a different area on my boat. We need to create a new group to account for those filters. I'm going to select this 3-dot menu over on the right-hand side, and we'll choose Add Group. Now we're going to go ahead, pick a group again, and since we've only created one group so far, we need to pick, well, we can't pick the same one we've already done. So trying to pick a new group. We'll create another one. And this time, let's say the 2 additional oil filters are stored in the starboard engine room. Not great organization to just have them floating about, but for the purposes of this example, it's fine. And then they're going to be the same Volvo Penta 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the manufacturer and model number. Hit create, and then come back to say where there are 2 oil filters in this group. So to recap, we have 5 total Volvo Penta oil filters. They all have the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 model number, but because they're stored in separate locations, we have 2 groups of these Volvo Penta filters. Now let's go ahead and add some engine oil so we can have another example. I'm going to give the item a name of oil 15W40, and we'll select add. Once again, we have to select the attributes we want to track for the engine oil. In this case, it will be helpful to know the units, and I'm going to track them in liters. I again want to track the manufacturer and model number. Don't really care about a serial number. I do care about a storage location. Expiration date, I can probably do without, but I do want to say that the oil can be partially consumed. And let's set up a minimum of 35 liters of oil that I'd like to keep in my inventory. That should allow me to do 1 oil change on both engines, both sail drives, and the generator. So we'll hit save and continue. And then the next step is going to create our first group, just like we did before for the oil. Let's go ahead and say that we store our engine room or store our engine oil in the port engine room. Select that storage location. And for this group, I'm going to say that the manufacturer is Shell Oil and the model number is 15W40. Now I can hit create, and then back on our inventory page, I'm going to add 25 liters to this group. And again, I'm going to keep repeating it, so hopefully it gets driven home. This group consists of Shell 15W40 stored in the port engine room. So now this is what I have in my inventory. Once again, let's go ahead and create one more group of 15W40. we'll pick the group, this time create a new group again, and this time, let's say the only place I had available for this extra oil was the starboard engine room. And instead of Shell, it's Chevron 15W40. Once that's entered, we can hit save. So hopefully this is really starting to make clear exactly what a group is. In this case, the two different groups allow us to track two different brands of engine oil stored in separate locations. But both of those groups still qualify under the same 15W40 oil umbrella. Now we still have to give a quantity to the Chevron, so I'm going to say we have 10 liters stored in the starboard engine room. Now you can use the same process to continue capturing all the items in your inventory. Now there's one other thing I want to point out before we leave this page, and that's this note down on the bottom. Do you want to add any notes or files? This can be super helpful if you want to, say, add a copy of the receipt from when you purchased all these inventory items. Now, since this is our initial setup, I'm not going to bother, but it's there for you if you want it. Now, at this point, I do want to say that we recognize boats are complex beasts, and entering each inventory item individually could be quite time-consuming. Now, we did develop a bulk upload process that can help with this, but it requires some additional work from our MaintenanceROS team, so there would be an additional charge to use that. However, if it's something you're interested in, please reach out to us at support@MaintenanceROS.com, and we can share more information. Now let's finish up this initial inventory setup and see what we've got. I'm going to come down to the bottom here and hit save. Back on our main inventory page, we can see a new line has been added to our recent changes, showing our initial setup. If I click on that, I can see a summary of everything that has been added. Back on our inventory page, I can now see we have some parts listed in our inventory. So we're well on our way to being able to use the full functionality of our inventory feature. We're going to stop this tutorial here, and in the next one, we'll talk about how you can attach parts from your inventory to a specific maintenance task. There are a lot of exciting things that opens up. Thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at support@MaintenanceROS.com or leave a comment down below. See you in the next one.